Rejection equals death. Okay, this morning I'm going to talk about the evolutionary basis of blushing phobia. Now, this is not an actual theory, it's a theory that I've concocted in my own mind. But if you bear with me, I think it can make sense, you know. It's, when I specifically say, I talk about blushing phobia, I ask myself the question, why is there so much, for some people, so much anxiety around the idea of, being humiliated, being singled out, and the rejection? Because that's what it is. That's what you feel when you blush. You're afraid that everyone's looking at you. You're afraid of feeling embarrassed, humiliated, and rejected. It's a rejection that you feel. It's not that people reject you. You feel this rejection. You fear this rejection. You fear the humiliation and the rejection. And there's lots of anxiety, anxiety and fear based around this. Anxiety because you're thinking of the future, what's going to happen. They're going to laugh at me. If they laugh at me, then I'm a failure. If I'm a failure, if you think about it, if you think forward and you think, you move forward and you say, well, okay, so let's say I'm a failure. So in my mind, I play the so what game. So let's say that the person feels humiliated. Then the question to ask yourself is, so what? Well, if you're humiliated, you're ostracized or rejected by the community, then so what? Well, if you're rejected from the community, you're on your own, and it doesn't make any sense that it would be so bad to be rejected. Now it doesn't make sense, but in the past, my theory is this: that we used to live in tribes or communities, in clusters, in small villages. Ancient man used to live like this, and the ancient human being had to rely on a community of people. And you would have the elder, and then you would have the workers or the soldiers or whatever, the men usually who went out hunting. You had the women who used to do, if they were more advanced, they would go and they would grow vegetables and stuff like that. They would look after the children. They would all have their jobs, in that society, their tasks and things that they're supposed to do. Okay, everybody had their place, but also it was a protection. The group was protected the individual, and so if, for example, an individual person was rejected from that group and thrown out of that group, out of the tribe, out of the village, then he would have to fend for himself. He would have to hunt for food. He would have to protect himself. He would have to build a shelter for himself. He would have to forage for food or hunt for food. And so rejection or humiliation, let's say rejection, would mean almost surely would mean death, because if you're kicked out of the village, then you die because you cannot fend for yourself. It's just too much. Even though you're let's say you're a strong man and you can hunt, you'd have to be intelligent enough to build a shelter. Okay, let's say you're intelligent enough. How can you fight against, dangerous animals and predators out there? It would be very difficult. Psychologically, it would be difficult as well. So it would almost mean death for the individual. So that's where you get the connection. Rejection equals death. And I believe that this is true. First of all, this is the case, and two, we have acquired this like subconsciously. It's an instinct inside us, inside our mind, that to be rejected equals death. It's of course nowadays it does not mean death if you're rejected, if you're not part of the group. But it's a subconscious kind of instinctive feeling. It's a gut feeling, a gut reaction that you don't understand. And this is what I think is or my theory of why rejection feels so bad. Humiliation. Why does it feel so bad? Because inside our mind, inside our subconscious, it's like a death. It's like a real death. It's like you're dying. So when you're standing up there in front of a crowd and you have to say this speech in front of hundreds of people, and you have this social phobia, then it's true, you do feel like you're dying. So I don't know, I think it's a good enough explanation for me. So I think to me it kind of makes sense that in our distant past, to be rejected by the group would mean almost certain death, because the person could not live outside of the village, outside of the community, because the person's basic needs would have to be met by the individual, him or herself. So you'd have to build a shelter. You may not know how to build a shelter. Maybe there were people in the community that built shelters, or in order to build a shelter you'd need a group of people. Some had to be strong, some had to be really good with their hands. I don't know. But for some reason, maybe you couldn't build a shelter on your own. You'd have to have the knowledge. It would take maybe many people, but even if you could build a shelter, you'd have to forage for vegetables, or grubs, or berries, or whatever. You'd have to be able to hunt by yourself, and you'd have to be able to protect yourself from predators. You'd have to go to sleep at night with one eye open, because some predators stalk their prey at night time. But also psychologically, emotionally, mentally, you'd be on your own. That would be difficult as well. And also, foraging for food. Maybe as an individual, you wouldn't know which foods were poisonous and which foods, were okay to eat. I don't know, but I think the connection is there, that if you were rejected from the group, rejected from society, or kicked out of the village, that the chances of you surviving was slim. So here's my theory. My theory is that from ancient times we have this inbuilt instinct, if you will, that rejection equals death.
Burning the bridge that keeps us. I'm here and I'm feeling exaggerated, that's what you assume. The story's over now, I must conclude. I am conflicted, watching where I step still, hanging in the balance. Not the life I want to live, I want to take it all. Standing tall, fear I weighed the person you are.